A frail and weakened woman seeks refuge in a mysterious mountain range, but an unexpected accident leaves her at the mercy of the unknown. Just when everything seems lost, a wild horse appears, and the impossible happens. A mist crawled silently across the ground in Blue Ridge Mountains, while the sun still struggled to break through the early dawn. Isabella Nelson gripped the steering wheel of her imported SUV tightly, her knuckles white from the pressure. The dirt road snaked up the mountain, each curve seeming more challenging than the last. "This is madness," she murmured to herself, adjusting the air conditioning. The rearview mirror reflected Atlanta growing increasingly distant, along with the meticulously planned life she had built. Financial director of a major bank, Isabella, 38, was accustomed to commanding rooms full of executives, not venturing into the Virginia countryside, following an inexplicable impulse. Especially not in her condition. Her hand instinctively rested on her 5-month pregnant belly, a high-risk pregnancy, surrounded by medical warnings and restrictions. Her obstetrician would have a fit if he knew where she was at that moment. Gentle spasm made her breathe deeply. The baby seemed restless, as if sharing its mother's growing anxiety. Or was it something more? "Easy, little one," she whispered, trying to calm herself as much as the child. "We're almost there." But where was there, exactly? Even she couldn't explain. She was merely following coordinates scribbled on a yellowed paper found among her deceased grandmother's belongings. "When the blood calls," the note said in shaky handwriting. After days of disturbing dreams and inexplicable sensations, Isabella had finally yielded to the impulse. She took leave from work, ignored her husband Patrick's protests, and departed without looking back. The GPS had lost signal miles ago, but something guided her, an inexplicable certainty that she was on the right path. When she spotted the small, adobe house with a thatched roof, she knew she had arrived. An elderly black woman with braided white hair and a time-weathered face sat in a rocking chair on the porch. She showed no surprise at seeing the car approach. "Took you long enough to come, child," said Mother Sarah without rising as Isabella struggled to get out of the vehicle. "The blood is already awakening." "How do you know my name?" Isabella asked, feeling her throat go dry. "Blood speaks," replied the healer, with a gaze that seemed to pierce the visitor's soul. "Your grandmother Cecilia warned me that you would come one day. My grandmother died 3 months ago." An enigmatic smile appeared on the old woman's face. "Distances are different here in the mountains, child. I see you've brought more than you imagined with you." A shiver ran down Isabella's spine when Mother Sarah looked directly at her belly. "He's already connected to this land. How do you know it's a boy? Not even I—" "Come inside," the woman interrupted, rising with surprising agility. "Night falls quickly in the mountains and there are eyes watching." As if to confirm her words, a black bird landed on the windowsill, its bright eyes fixed on Isabella. "What does all this mean? Why am I here?" she asked as she followed the old woman into the house, where the smell of dried herbs filled the air. "You came because you were called," replied Mother Sarah, indicating a chair for Isabella to sit. "Your family has a debt to the mountain, and it seems you were chosen to settle it." "What debt? My family never lived here." "No, but your great-grandfather Edward did." The healer lit a small lantern as the house quickly darkened. "He made his fortune cutting down the sacred trees of the mountain. He broke ancient pacts. Now balance demands restoration." Outside, the wind began to blow strongly, making the windows tremble. Isabella felt the baby move violently. "And what happens if I don't want to participate in this?" Isabella asked, her trembling voice betraying her usual control. Mother Sarah's eyes narrowed. "It's not a choice, child. The guardians of the mountain have already marked you, and they have marked your son as well." At that moment, Isabella's phone rang, breaking the tension. It was Patrick, concerned about her sudden disappearance. "Where are you?" Patrick's voice sounded distant, broken by the poor connection. "Isabella, you need to come back. Dr. Miller is worried about your test." "Results?" Isabella moved away from the window, seeking better reception. "I'm fine, Patrick. I need a few days to—" She hesitated, not knowing how to explain something that even she didn't fully understand. to resolve family matters. What matters? You never mentioned relatives in Virginia. The call dropped before she could respond. Isabella stared at her phone screen. No signal. She turned to Mother Sarah, who was calmly mixing herbs in a mortar. My husband wouldn't understand. He's very rational. The healer smiled. Big city men often are, but the mountain has its own ways of convincing non-believers. Thunder reverberated in the distance, as if nature itself confirmed her words. "Rest tonight," continued the old woman, serving an aromatic tea in a clay mug. "Tomorrow we'll visit the place where it all began." Dawn brought with it a diffuse clarity, filtered by the persistent mist. Isabella had slept little, tormented by strange dreams where she ran through the forest, pursued by shadows. In all of them, a chestnut-colored horse appeared, guiding her away from danger. "You saw him, didn't you?" asked Mother Sarah upon finding her on the porch, her eyes still heavy with sleep. "Who?" "Russet, the guardian." Isabella felt a chill. "How do you know about my dreams?" "They're not just dreams, child." The healer adjusted a shawl on her shoulders. "They're memories your blood carries. Come, we have much ground to cover today." The Kio trail climbed steeply up the mountainside. Mother Sarah, despite her advanced age, moved with ease among the rocks and roots. Isabella followed with difficulty, her body heavy and unaccustomed to that terrain. "Your great-grandmother Antonia was a strong woman like you," commented the elder without turning around. "But different. She respected the signs." Signs? The mountain's warnings. When her husband Edward began cutting down the sacred trees to sell the timber, she tried to stop him. Isabella felt a twinge in her belly. She stopped, leaning against a trunk while catching her breath. "My family never mentioned these ancestors." "Of course not." Mother Sarah finally turned to her. "Shame silences stories, child. When misfortune struck Edward, your family preferred to bury the past along with him." They continued walking in silence until they reached a clearing. In the center, an enormous oak spread its branches like twisted arms. Something about the tree seemed to call to Isabella, who approached as if in a trance. "It was here," said the healer, her voice low and reverent. "Here that Edward defied the guardians. He cut down 33 sacred trees before the warning came." "What warning?" Isabella touched the rough trunk of the oak, feeling a strange vibration under her fingers. "The same one you received in your dreams." Russet appeared to him, warning about the breaking of the ancestral pact. He ignored it. The next night, a branch fell on his tent. Mother Sarah pointed to a blackened mark on the tree trunk, a scar that seemed to pulse under the filtered sunlight. He survived, but was never the same. He spent his final days haunted by visions. Antonia tried to restore the balance, but the damage was already done. "And what does this have to do with me, with my son?" The healer observed her for long seconds before answering. "You are the last of the bloodline. The debt has passed from generation to generation until it reached you." "This is absurd," protested Isabella, her rational side trying to overcome the inexplicable sensations flooding her. "I can't be held responsible for something that happened more than a century ago." "The mountain doesn't know time as we do, child. For it, the wound is still open, and your son—" Mother Sarah paused, her eyes fixed on Isabella's belly. "He was chosen to be the link of reconciliation." At that moment, a rustling of leaves caught the attention of both women. Among the shadows of the forest, bright eyes appeared and quickly disappeared. "We need to return," said the healer urgently. "The day advances and it's not safe to stay here after dusk." On the way back, Isabella felt observed. The wind seemed to carry whispers, incomprehensible words in an ancient language. "How can I restore this balance?" she finally asked when the house was already in sight. "Even I don't have that answer," admitted Mother Sarah. "But I know that tonight you will receive a visitor, and then perhaps the path will reveal itself." Suddenly, the mountain seemed to envelop Isabella in a suffocating embrace. What had begun as an impulsive journey now revealed itself as a complex web of family secrets and ancestral debts. And at the center of it all, her unborn son, marked by a destiny she was only beginning to understand. Night fell heavily over the mountain, bringing with it an almost palpable darkness. Inside Mother Sarah's house, Isabella fidgeted restlessly on the improvised bed, unable to sleep. Her cell phone had finally caught a signal, and dozens of messages from Patrick filled the screen with increasing concern. "If I don't hear from you by tomorrow, I'm calling the police," said the last message. She sighed, typing a brief response. "I'm fine. I need a few more days, trust me." How could she explain to Patrick what was happening? He, a renowned neurosurgeon for whom everything needed a logical explanation and scientific proof. When she had told him about the strange dreams during pregnancy, he had promptly attributed them to hormones. "Perfectly normal," he had said, with that condescending smile that now irritated her to remember. A subtle noise at the window interrupted her thoughts. The same blackbird from the day before was watching her, motionless, eyes gleaming in the darkness. "What do you want from me?" whispered Isabella, approaching slowly. As if understanding the question, the bird flapped its wings 3 times and flew away, disappearing into the night. Without thinking twice, Isabella put on a jacket and silently left the house. The full moon bathed the landscape with a silvery light, revealing the path the bird seemed to have taken. "You shouldn't be out here alone." The deep, unfamiliar voice made Isabella turn abruptly. A tall man, with tanned skin and Native American features, was observing her a few meters away. He wore simple mountain clothes, but there was something in his posture that suggested an ancestral dignity. "Who are you?" she asked, instinctively protective, hands over her belly. "My name is River." He didn't approach, respecting her space. "I'm Mother Sarah's grandson, and you must be Isabella Nelson, the woman who came to settle the debt." The way he spoke, without questions or disbelief, just a quiet acceptance of something extraordinary, disconcerted Isabella. "You believe all this story too?" River smiled slightly. "It's not a question of believing or not. The marks are there, in the mountain, in the trees, in the blood that runs in your veins." He pointed to the forest. "Russet has appeared again. It's a sign that the time is coming." "Russet? The horse from my dreams?" "He is more than a simple horse. He's a guardian, a messenger between worlds." River began to walk slowly, and Isabella followed, drawn by his calmness. "He only appears when the balance is threatened or about to be restored." They arrived at a small elevation, from where they could see the entire extension of the valley below, bathed in moonlight. The wild beauty of the place was breathtaking. "My grandmother told me about you since I was a child, the woman who would come from the city, carrying in her womb the hope of reconciliation." Isabella felt the baby move as if responding to River's words. "I never asked for this. I have a life out there, a career, a husband, and yet you're here." River's gaze was penetrating but gentle. "The call of blood is stronger than any will, Isabella." A comfortable silence established itself between them, broken only by the night sounds of the mountain. Finally, Isabella asked the question that was tormenting her. "What will happen to my child?" River breathed deeply before answering. "Your son will be born between two worlds, with one foot in the city and another in the mountain. He will be the bridge that will restore the balance if you allow it. And if I don't allow it, then the rupture will continue and the curse will follow its course." "Curse?" Isabella's heart accelerated. "What curse?" "The one that has pursued your family for generations. Why do you think your pregnancy is high risk? Why did your mother lose 3 babies before you were born? Why did your grandmother live tormented by nightmares?" River made a broad gesture, encompassing the entire mountain. "Everything is connected, Isabella. Edward's choices echo until today." A sudden breeze brought with it the aroma of wet earth and wild plants. Far away, the neighing of a horse cut through the night. "He's calling," said River, visibly tensing. "We need to go back. The night in the mountains holds its own dangers." On the way back, Isabella noticed shadows moving among the trees, silently accompanying them. "What are those things?" she whispered, grabbing River's arm. "Lesser guardians. They're curious about you." He placed his hand over hers reassuringly. "Don't fear. As long as you're with me, they won't touch you." Back at the house, Mother Sarah was waiting for them on the porch as if she knew exactly where they had been. "I see you've already met my grandson," said the old woman, her wrinkled face illuminated by a lantern. "He will be your guide tomorrow." "Guide to where?" asked Isabella, exhausted both physically and emotionally. "To the place where reconciliation must begin. The stone circle." River exchanged a significant look with his grandmother before turning to Isabella. "Rest well. Tomorrow will be an important day for you. And for your son." As she lay down again, Isabella felt the weight of generations on her shoulders. Patrick, the hospital, Atlanta, everything seemed increasingly distant, as if it belonged to another life. There, among the mysterious mountains of Virginia, a new path was opening. A path that, despite the fear, she was beginning to accept as her destiny. The sun had barely risen when Isabella was awakened by soft knocks on the door. River waited outside, holding a backpack and a water bottle. "We need to leave while the mist still covers the mountain," he said, handing her the bottle. "The path is long." Isabella hesitated, looking at her cell phone. More messages from Patrick, increasingly desperate. She quickly typed, "I'm in an area without signal. I'll contact you as soon as possible." A partial lie that would give her a few more hours. Mother Sarah appeared with a leaf-wrapped bundle containing homemade bread and fruit. "Eat as you walk, child. You need strength." The old healer held Isabella's hands between hers, her eyes sunk into Isabella's with a disconcerting intensity. "Listen with your heart to what the mountain has to say. The stones hold memories older than our words." Isabella nodded, a strange feeling of certainty beginning to replace the doubts that had accompanied her until then. The path constantly climbed, winding between rock formations and areas of dense vegetation. River walked ahead, occasionally extending his hand to help her on the more difficult stretches. They spoke little, but the silence was not uncomfortable. "How did you end up returning to the mountain?" asked Isabella during a rest break. "Your grandmother mentioned that you studied away." River smiled, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Environmental engineering in Richmond. I even worked for a multinational for 2 years. He picked up a small stone, turning it between his fingers. "But the mountain called me back, just as it called you. The difference is that you belong to this place. And so do you, Isabella. You just don't know it yet." They continued climbing for another hour, until the vegetation began to become sparser. River stopped abruptly, raising his hand in warning. "What is it?" whispered Isabella. "We're being watched." Among the rocks about 50 meters away, an animal was observing them. It wasn't a simple horse, Isabella realized. There was something almost supernatural in the way it remained motionless, only its eyes following each movement. "Russet," she murmured, instantly recognizing the animal from her dreams. "He's been waiting for you for a long time," said River, his voice low and reverent. As if it had heard its name, the horse softly neighed and disappeared among the rocks. "He wants us to follow him," explained River, already resuming the walk. The path became steeper and Isabella's breathing heavier. Her body, unaccustomed to that effort, protested. When she thought she couldn't take it anymore, they finally spotted their destination. The stone circle stood imposingly on top of a natural plateau. 12 monoliths almost 2 meters high, arranged in a perfect circle. In the center, a flattened stone, like a primitive altar. The atmosphere of the place seemed to vibrate with an ancient energy. "What is this place?" asked Isabella, feeling her skin prickle. "A portal," replied River. "A place between worlds, where the guardians of the mountain can be summoned, or appeased." As they entered the circle, a sudden change occurred in the environment. The sounds of the forest fell silent, as if an invisible bubble isolated them from the outside world. The air seemed to become denser, charged with an aroma that reminded of wet earth and wild herbs. "This is where we'll begin the reconciliation ritual," said River, removing a small red cloth bundle from his backpack. "This belonged to your great-grandmother Antonia." Inside the cloth, a silver chain with a green stone pendant worked in the shape of a leaf. "How did you get this?" asked Isabella, touching the object with hesitation. Your grandmother Cecilia brought it to Mother Sarah shortly before she died. She knew you would come. River placed the necklace in Isabella's hands. She tried to warn you about your mission, but didn't have time. Memories flooded Isabella's mind. The strange stories that her grandmother told about the mountain when she was a child. The insistent recommendations to never cut a tree without asking permission. The way she became agitated during storms, murmuring incomprehensible words. She knew, whispered Isabella, understanding coming like a wave. All this time she tried to prepare me. Yes, but some truths can only be transmitted directly, from blood to blood. River led her to the center of the circle where the flattened stone awaited. With precise gestures, he traced symbols in the air and on the ground around them. Now lie down and place the necklace on your womb, he instructed. Is it safe for the baby? It's necessary. For the baby, for you, for all of us. With reluctance, Isabella obeyed. The stone was surprisingly warm under her back, as if it retained the heat of the sun even in the coldest hours. River began to chant words in a language that she did not recognize, but which echoed in her strangely, familiarly, as if her blood responded to a primordial call. The wind increased, circulating within the space delimited by the stones. Suddenly, Isabella felt an overwhelming dizziness. Her body seemed to be sinking into the stone, while her mind expanded in all directions. Images began to appear. Ancestral forests, rituals by moonlight, men and women in communion with the earth. And then, more recent, her great-grandfather cutting down centuries-old trees, her great-grandmother's tears, the curse uttered by invisible lips. What's happening to me? She managed to ask, her voice distant and strange to her own ears. The truth is revealing itself, replied River, his voice seeming to come from far away. Accept it, Isabella. Only then can you make your choice. A choice, but which one and at what price? The visions became more vivid, as if Isabella was watching a movie in which she was, simultaneously, spectator and participant. She felt inside the events, breathing the same air, feeling the same emotions as those she saw. There was Edward Nelson, her great-grandfather, a tall man with severe features and an ambitious look. Young and strong, he commanded a group of workers who were cutting down centuries-old trees on the mountain. The sound of axes echoed through the forest like screams of pain. The wood from these oaks will make us rich, Antonia, he said to his wife, a delicate woman with sad eyes. Atlanta is growing, and those cotton barons will pay fortunes for furniture made with noble wood. Antonia, however, did not share his enthusiasm. These trees are sacred, Edward, the mountain people warned us. There are consequences in disturbing what should remain untouched. He laughed, scornful. Superstitions of ignorant people. I only believe in what I see, in what I can touch. The scene changed. Night in the forest. Antonia alone near a stream, murmuring words in an ancient language. Her expression was one of despair. Beside her, a small bundle, a baby that no longer moved. Please, she implored invisible entities, don't punish the innocent for the father's mistakes. Take me instead. A sudden breeze stirred the trees. Among the shadows, eyes shone. Hooves sounded against stones. Russet appeared, majestic and terrible in his supernatural beauty. The debt will be paid, said a voice that seemed to come from all directions, and none. Not by you, not by your son, but blood will call blood when the time is right. The vision transformed again. Edward in bed, his body deformed by a poorly healed wound, his eyes feverish with delirium. I see them. They're coming for me, Antonia. The guardians, Russet. He follows me in dreams. Shh, she calmed him, passing a damp cloth over his forehead. It was just an accident, my love. You'll get better. But both knew it was a lie. The branch that had fallen on him had not been accidental. It had been a warning, a punishment, the first blow of a retribution that was just beginning. Years passed in Isabella's visions. The fortune built with the mountain's timber allowed the Nelson family to establish themselves in Atlanta. Edward never walked without aid again, and his temperament became bitter, violent. Antonia slowly withered, consumed by guilt and the weight of the secret she carried. The couple's daughter Helen grew up without knowing the true origin of the family wealth. Beautiful and educated in good schools, she married young, but her happiness was brief. 3 pregnancies, 3 painful losses. At 30, she already walked bent like an old woman, eyes empty of hope. Until Cecilia was born, a fragile child who should not have survived, but who clung to life with unexpected tenacity. Helen died in childbirth. Her last words a whispered warning, protect her from the curse. Cecilia, my grandmother, murmured Isabella, feeling tears streaming down her face as the images continued to flow. She saw Cecilia grow up, tormented by nightmares she did not understand. Dreams where wild horses chased her, where giant trees bent accusingly over her. She married, had a daughter, Isabella's mother, and tried to warn, to pass on the little she knew. But who would believe in stories of family curses in the middle of the 20th century? Isabella returned to consciousness gradually, like someone emerging from deep waters. Her entire body trembled, and her face was wet with tears she hadn't even realized she was shedding. River observed her in silence, his expression a mixture of compassion and expectation. What was that?" she stammered, trying to sit up. "The truth." He helped her to rise. "Your story. The story your family tried to forget." The sun was beginning to set, tinting the stone circle with orange hues. Isabella could hardly believe she had spent hours there, lost in visions of the past. So that's it. All the tragedies in my family, my mother's depression, my aunt's miscarriages, my own problems with pregnancy, all because of a curse. River shook his head gently. Not a curse, an imbalance. When your great-grandfather destroyed part of the sacred forest, he broke an ancestral pact between your family and the guardians of the mountain. He helped her to stand. The guardians preserve balance. If someone takes, something must be given back. And now what do they want from me? From my son. Before River could answer, a loud neigh cut through the air. Russet appeared at the entrance to the stone circle, his chestnut coat gleaming like fire under the sunset light. The horse approached slowly, eyes fixed on Isabella. "He came for you," said River, respectfully moving away. "This is a moment between you." Isabella felt her heart accelerate. Part of her wanted to flee, run back to Atlanta, to the safety of her air-conditioned apartment and her predictable life. But another part, a part that grew with each moment, longed for this encounter. What should I do? Listen, he has something to say. Russet stopped a few steps from her. His eyes, of an almost supernatural deep brown, seemed to see through to her soul. Slowly the animal lowered its head, touching Isabella's womb with its muzzle. In that instant a connection was established. There were no words, only images and sensations that flowed directly into her mind. Isabella saw the forest as never before, alive and pulsating, each tree a conscious entity, each stone holding millennial memories. She felt the delicate balance that kept everything in harmony, and the open wound caused by her great-grandfather's greed, a wound that bled through generations. And then she saw her son, not yet born, but already connected to this web of life. She saw him grow between two worlds, one foot in the city and another on the mountain, a living link between past and present, capable of healing ancient ruptures. When the vision ceased, Isabella staggered, supported by River. "You saw, didn't you?" he asked. "The path of reconciliation." She nodded, unable to speak. Russet backed up a few steps, still observing her intensely. "They don't want to take your son," explained River. "They want him to be a guardian of the new pact, a mediator, between worlds." "How?" "I don't understand." River pointed to the necklace in her hands, the ancient artifact of her great-grandmother. "This is a symbol of commitment. If you accept the mission, you must return to your life in Atlanta, but raise your son knowing his roots, bringing him regularly to the mountain. He will learn the old ways, respect the balance, become a guardian of the traditions your family abandoned. And if I refuse? River's gaze darkened. Then the imbalance will continue. What began with Edward will follow its course. Perhaps your son will survive, perhaps not. But the debt will remain, waiting for another generation, another blood-bearer. Isabella stared at the horizon, where the sun was slowly bidding farewell. The mountain seemed to breathe around her, alive and expectant. In her womb the baby moved, as if participating in the decision. Is it fair that my child carries this responsibility? Fair, River smiled sadly. Nature doesn't know our concept of justice, Isabella. It knows only balance. Each action generates consequences, whether in minutes or in centuries. Russet neighed again, impatient. He waits for your answer, said River. Isabella closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the choice before her. It wasn't just her future at stake, but that of her son, and perhaps that of generations to come. Patrick would never understand. Her career, her carefully planned life, everything would change. She would have to learn to live between two worlds, just like her son. But for the first time since arriving at the mountain, she felt a strange peace taking hold of her, as if finally she was on the right path. With trembling hands, she placed the necklace around her neck. I accept, she said, her voice surprisingly firm, for my son, for the balance. Russet raised his head, satisfied, and darted out of the stone circle, disappearing into the growing dusk. The first part is done, said River, but the reconciliation ritual is not yet complete. There is something else you need to do. What? Plant the seeds of the sacred trees in the same places where they were cut down. That's how the balance begins to be restored. A sudden wind stirred the stones around, like a sigh of approval. And when should we do that? Tonight, during the full moon. River extended his hand to help her descend from the plateau. Come, my grandmother is waiting for us with everything we need. As they headed back to Mother Sarah's house, Isabella felt as if a weight had been removed from her shoulders. The path ahead would be complex, filled with challenges and difficult explanations. But for the first time in her life, she felt truly connected to something greater than herself. Night had fallen completely over the mountain when Isabella and River arrived at Mother Sarah's house. The old woman awaited them on the porch, a gleam of approval in her tired eyes. You chose the path of reconciliation, she said, not as a question but as a statement. I feel the power of the necklace activated. Isabella instinctively touched the key, pendant at her neck, surprised to find that it emitted a slight warmth. It really belonged to my great-grandmother. Yes, Antonia received it from the Guardians, even before she met your great-grandfather. It was a symbol of protection for her, family who always respected the mountain. Mother Sarah led them inside the house. She tried to use it to stop Edward, but he wouldn't listen. Later, when she realized the harm he had done, she tried to use it to remedy the situation, but it was too late. The balance had already been broken. On the kitchen table, a small carved wooden box awaited. Beside it, an old and faded map of the Blue Ridge Mountains. These are the seeds of the sacred trees, explained the healer, opening the box to reveal small bright seeds. Kept for generations, waiting for the right moment. River spread out the map, pointing to specific markings. Here are the exact places where the trees were cut down. 33 points. He looked at Isabella. The ritual requires that you personally plant at least 3 of them, the most important ones. Tonight? Isabella felt fatigue weighing in her bones. Can't I wait until tomorrow? Mother Sarah shook her head. It must be under the full moon. That's when the barrier between worlds is thinnest, and the Guardians can witness your commitment. As they prepared to leave, Isabella's phone rang. It was Patrick once again. With a heavy sigh, she answered. Isabella, for God's sake. His voice was a mixture of relief and fury. I've been trying to locate you properly for 2 days. You can't just disappear like that in your condition. Patrick, No, listen to me. I've already contacted the police. We managed to track the approximate location of your cell phone. I'm on my way, should arrive there in a few hours. Isabella's heart raced. No, Patrick, don't do that. I'm fine, You're not fine, he interrupted. You disappeared without explanation. You're in a remote place sending strange messages. Dr. Miller is extremely worried about the baby. Whatever you're doing there, it's over. I'm coming to get you. The call dropped before she could protest. Isabella stared at the device, a whirlwind of emotions dominating her. My husband is coming, she said to River and Mother Sarah. He contacted the police. He thinks I'm having some kind of psychotic episode because of the pregnancy. That complicates things, murmured River, concerned. We need to perform the ritual before he arrives. But how will I explain all this to him? Patrick is the most skeptical man I know. He'll never believe in ancestral pacts and mountain guardians. Mother Sarah approached, placing a wrinkled hand on Isabella's womb. If it's meant to be, the seeds will find a way to germinate even in resistant soil, she said enigmatically. Now let's go. The moon is already high and time runs against us. With improvised torches and the box of seeds, they set off into the forest. The night was clear, the full moon illuminating the path with a silvery light that made the landscape almost dreamlike. Isabella walked with difficulty but determination. Something inside her had irrevocably changed after the experience in the stone circle. The first planting site was near the clearing with the great oak. River explained that this had been the center of the sacred grove, where the first tree had been cut down. This is the most important seed, he said, handing Isabella a seed larger than the others, with a golden gleam under the moonlight. You must dig with your own hands and recite the words your heart knows. What words? Nobody taught me anything. The necklace will guide you, trust. With trembling hands, Isabella dug a small hole in the moist earth. Upon touching the soil, she felt an immediate connection, like invisible roots extending from her fingers to the depths of the earth. Words arose in her mind, in a language she had never heard, but which somehow she perfectly understood. What was broken now reconnects, she translated, as she deposited the seed in the soil. What was forgotten now is remembered. Blood pays to blood, life to life. A new pact is established, a new guardian will rise. As she covered the seed with earth, a sensation of warmth spread from her hands throughout her body. The baby moved, energetically in her womb, as if responding to the ritual. He feels it, she whispered, amazed. He understands what we're doing. River smiled. Of course he does. He is already a guardian, just waiting to be born. They proceeded to the second and third points, repeating the ritual. At each location, Isabella felt the connection strengthening, the bond between her, her son, and the mountain becoming almost tangible. At the last planting, when the ritual words were pronounced, a sudden wind stirred the treetops around them. A distant neigh echoed in the night. Russet is satisfied, commented Mother Sarah, raising the torch to illuminate the way back. The pact has been accepted. As they returned to the house, Isabella felt a peace she had never experienced before. But this serenity was brutally interrupted by the sound of engines approaching. Lights on. The road, warned River, tensing. It looks like your husband arrived earlier than we expected. Isabella's heart tightened. Two worlds were about to collide, and she was at the center of this collision. Two headlights cut through the darkness of the dirt road, briefly illuminating the figures of Isabella, River, and Mother Sarah, who had just emerged from the trail. An imported car stopped abruptly, raising dust. Patrick Miller jumped out of the vehicle before even completely turning off the engine. Isabella! His voice was a mixture of relief and incredulity at seeing his wife, dirty with earth, disheveled, here next to strangers in the middle of the night. Behind him, a police car was also approaching. Patrick, I can explain, she began, but the words seemed insufficient given the situation. The doctor ran to his wife, examining her with clinical eyes, looking for signs of injuries or dehydration. Are you okay? What happened? Who are these people? He cast a suspicious look at River and Mother Sarah. Did they kidnap you? Force you to come here? No, Patrick, I came of my own free will. The police officer approached, hand resting preventively on his holster. Ma'am, is everything all right? He asked, looking alternately at Isabella and the two natives. Yes, officer. These are my friends. I am here voluntarily. Patrick shook, his head confused. Friends? You never mentioned knowing anyone in Virginia, much less... He vaguely gestured toward Mother Sarah's simple house. River stepped forward, extending his hand in a gesture of peace. I'm River Taylor, sir. My grandmother, Mother Sarah, is providing spiritual aid to your wife during this important moment of her pregnancy. Patrick ignored the extended hand, his expression hardening. Spiritual aid, he repeated, incredulous. Isabella, you abandoned your treatment with Dr. Miller, the best obstetrician in Atlanta, to consult a healer, completed Mother Sarah, unfazed by the implicit disdain. And yes, your wife sought me out because she felt the call of blood, something that modern medicine doesn't explain, but that is as real as the air we breathe. The officer, sensing the growing tension, intervened. Dr. Miller, if your wife confirms she's here of her own free will and doesn't appear to be in danger, there's not much we can officially do. Patrick ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. Isabella, let's talk in private, please. She nodded, following him to a few meters away. The officer returned to his vehicle but remained alert. What's happening to you? Asked Patrick gently, holding his wife's arms. First the nightmares, then the insistence on stopping the medication, and now this. Running off to the middle of nowhere seeking healers. His eyes showed genuine concern, and Isabella felt a pang of guilt. He loved her in his way and was just trying to protect her. Patrick, I know it seems crazy, but I've discovered things about my family, about our son. She touched the necklace, seeking strength. There's a connection between our baby and this place, something I can't explain in scientific terms, but that is real. Isabella, you're pregnant. Hormones, stress, it's normal to have strange thoughts, but they're not strange thoughts, she cut him off, with a firmness that surprised them both. Patrick, have you ever wondered why so many women in my family had problems with pregnancy? Why my mother lost 3 babies before me? Why my own pregnancy is considered high risk without any identifiable medical cause? He hesitated. They're coincidences, maybe genetic predispositions. Dunno, it's an imbalance that needs to be corrected. Isabella took a deep breath. I completed a ritual tonight, a commitment to the guardians of the mountain, to protect our son. Patrick stepped back, looking at her as if seeing her for the first time. Are you listening to what you're saying? Guardians, rituals. His tone was the same he used with confused patience. Isabella, you need medical help. Let's go back to Atlanta. Dr. Santos can recommend a good psychiatrist. I'm not crazy, Patrick. I didn't say you are, but pregnancy can trigger various temporary conditions. Gestational psychosis, for example. A dry laugh escaped Isabella's lips. Of course, always a clinical explanation, right? A diagnosis, a medicine, problem solved. And what's your explanation? Forest spirits, ancestral curses. Before she could respond, a powerful neigh cut through the night. Russet appeared at the edge of the forest, his majestic silhouette outlined against the full moon. The horse observed the scene with an almost human intensity. The police officer rose startled in his vehicle. Patrick froze in place. What is that? He murmured, observing the strange behavior of the animal. It's Russet, responded Isabella with reverence. A guardian of the mountain. He came to witness my choice. Russet neighed again, stamping his hooves on the ground 3 times. A sudden wind stirred the trees around, and the temperature seemed to drop several degrees in a matter of seconds. This is not normal, said Patrick, his trembling voice betraying his usual skepticism. No ordinary horse behaves like this. Because he's not an ordinary horse. Mother Sarah approached slowly. Your husband needs to understand, child. Not with words, but with his heart. She extended a small bundle to Patrick. Take this, doctor. The tea of truth. It will help you see beyond the veil. Patrick looked suspiciously at the package of herbs. I'm not going to ingest unknown substances. Ma'am, it's just lemon balm and melissa, River reassured, with a little sacred leaf from the mountain. Nothing hallucinogenic or harmful, I guarantee you. I'm a doctor. I know the risks of... Patrick. Isabella held her husband's hand. looking into his eyes. Please, if you love me, if you love our son, give it a chance. Come with me to the stone circle. See with your own eyes what I've discovered. Afterward, if you still think I'm delusional, I'll go back to Atlanta with you. No protests." Patrick hesitated, divided between his scientific skepticism and love for his wife. For the first time, he saw something different in her gaze, not confusion or disorientation, but a serene certainty that disconcerted him. "1 hour," he finally said. "I'll give 1 hour for this demonstration. Then we go home and you consult a specialist. Deal?" Isabella nodded, relieved. "I'll let the officer know everything's fine," said Patrick, moving away. Mother Sarah smiled at Isabella, a gleam of approval in her ancient eyes. "The guardians are satisfied," she whispered. "The child's father is also part of the pact, even without knowing it yet." Russet watched attentively from the edge of the forest, as if comprehending every word exchanged. When Patrick returned, the animal turned around and plunged into the woods, as if inviting them to follow. "Let's go," said River, lighting the torches again. "The night isn't over yet, and there's much your husband needs to see." As the strange group entered the forest, Isabella felt the baby moving energetically in her womb, as if celebrating. Perhaps there was hope, after all. Perhaps Patrick could understand what words couldn't explain, and if he didn't, well, she had already made her choice. The trail to the stone circle seemed different under the full moon's light. The forest contours gained softer, almost ethereal aspects, and the silence was profound, as if the mountain itself was holding its breath. Patrick walked tensely, eyes alert to every movement in the shadows. As a scientist, he sought rational explanations for everything he saw, but something that night was beginning to challenge his deepest certainties. "The mountain has one of the oldest rock formations in America," explained River, trying to establish some connection with the doctor. "Geologists estimate over 1 billion years." "Fascinating," Patrick responded dryly, "but that doesn't explain why my wife abandoned her treatment to plant seeds by moonlight." Isabella, walking ahead with Mother Sarah, sighed. The chasm between their worlds seemed insurmountable. How could she make Patrick understand something that she herself had only understood through experiencing it? "We've arrived," announced the healer. The stone circle rose imposingly on the plateau, bathed in silvery light. The 12 stone sentinels projected long shadows on the ground, creating mysterious patterns that seemed to move subtly when observed from the corner of the eye. "Impressive," admitted Patrick, his scientific interest momentarily overcoming his skepticism. "It looks like a megalithic construction. Who built this?" "Nobody knows for certain," answered River. "The ancient peoples of the mountain say it has always been here, a place where guardians can be contacted." Patrick rolled his eyes but didn't comment. Mother Sarah led the group inside the circle. In the center, where hours before Isabella had lain to receive the visions, the flattened stone seemed to pulse with an internal light. "Now, Doctor," said the old woman, extending a small clay container. "The tea." Patrick hesitated, looking at Isabella for confirmation. "Trust me," she asked, holding his hand. "Just once in your life, Patrick, allow yourself to see beyond your certainties." With visible reluctance, he accepted the container and took a sip, grimacing at the bitterness. "And now? Should I expect hallucinations?" Mother Sarah smiled patiently. "No, Doctor. Just open your senses to what has always been here. But you couldn't see." Patrick returned, the container clearly skeptical, but willing to tolerate the ritual for Isabella's sake. River lit small torches around the circle, while the healer began to chant a low, rhythmic song. "This is ridiculous," Patrick murmured to Isabella. "You really believe that—" His words were abruptly interrupted. A strange vibration ran through the stone circle, making the air shimmer like heat waves. The torch flames oscillated, although there was no wind. And then Patrick saw. First, they were just shadows, moving in his peripheral vision. Then more defined silhouettes, ethereal figures that seemed made of mist and moonlight, beings that shouldn't exist in the rational world he knew. "What's happening?" he whispered, his voice trembling. What's in this tea? Nothing that isn't. Also in you, replied Mother Sarah. The tea merely removes the veil that separates what you allow yourself to see from what truly exists. The figures became clearer. Among them, Russet appeared, more majestic than ever, his eyes shining like stars. Beside him, other creatures, some resembling forest animals, others completely indescribable, observed the group of humans with ancient curiosity. "The Guardians," murmured Isabella, squeezing Patrick's hand. "Can you see them?" He nodded, unable to form words. Years of scientific education and rational skepticism crumbled before his eyes. River approached the doctor. "Your son will be one of them, Doctor. Her mediator between worlds, able to see beyond the veil without needing rituals or teas. It's a rare gift, an honor, and a responsibility." "Why?" Patrick finally managed to articulate. "Why our son? Your wife's blood carries an ancient debt, but it also carries potential." River pointed to the necklace Isabella wore. Generations of her family tried to escape this commitment. Isabella was the first to accept it, opening a new path. Russet slowly advanced into the circle, stopping in front of Patrick. The doctor felt paralyzed, not from fear but from awe. The horse inclined its head, touching Patrick's chest with its muzzle, exactly over his heart. 4 months passed since that magical night in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The penthouse apartment in Atlanta looked the same. Elegant furniture, carefully selected artwork, the impressive view of the city that never slept. But something had fundamentally changed in the inhabitants of that space. Isabella was sitting on the balcony, admiring the urban sunset, so different from what she saw on the mountain. Her womb, now voluminous in the 9th month of pregnancy, housed an exceptionally active baby. According to Dr. Miller, everything was progressing perfectly well, to the surprise of the medical team that had considered her pregnancy high risk. "Any sign?" asked Patrick, coming out of the home office with a cup of herbal tea that Mother Sarah had sent. "Not yet," smiled Isabella, accepting the drink. "But he's restless today. I think he feels his time is coming." Patrick sat beside her, placing his hand on her belly to feel his son's movements. He was almost unrecognizable from the man he was before. His hair, always perfectly trimmed, was now a little longer. A well-groomed beard covered his face, and around his neck a leather cord with a small green stone, similar to Isabella's necklace, rested discreetly. Patrick's transformation had been the biggest surprise of all. After the experience in the stone circle, he had spent days in contemplative silence, reorganizing his entire worldview. Initially, he tried to rationalize what he had seen: effects of suggestion, possible substances in the tea, emotional exhaustion. But when Russet appeared in his dreams 3 consecutive nights, sharing visions of his son's future, Patrick finally surrendered. "I talked to the department head today," he commented, observing the horizon. "I asked for a reduced workload for next year. I want to have time to take Michael to the mountain regularly." Isabella smiled. Michael had been chosen in honor of the Archangel Michael, protector of the balance between heaven and earth, a name that pleased both Patrick and Mother Sarah. What did he say? He was surprised, of course, the workaholic neurosurgeon asking to work less. Patrick laughed softly. But he agreed, said it was about time I had a life beyond the hospital. Isabella's phone vibrated with a message. It was a photo sent by River. The first seed planted by her was already sprouting, a small green shoot emerging from the red earth of the mountain. "Look!" She showed her husband, excited. "It's growing." Patrick observed the image, thoughtful. "Sometimes I wonder if we're doing the right thing, raising our son between 2 such different worlds." "Do you regret it?" asked Isabella, a touch of concern in her voice. He shook his head, determined. "No, I lived 38 years seeing only half of reality, Isabella. I don't want that for our son. I want him to see the world in its totality, with eyes open to both science and mysteries." The apartment around them had also undergone subtle transformations. In a corner of the living room, a small table with stones from the mountain, seeds, and carefully cultivated plants. In the baby's room, paintings of the mountains and Blue Ridge flora decorated the walls, along with a handcrafted mobile made by Mother Sarah, which rotated gently even without wind. Friends and colleagues noticed the change in the couple, but couldn't identify exactly what it was. "They're more centered," they commented, "more connected." Some attributed it to the pregnancy, others to maturity. No one suspected the truth. "I finished the preparations for the trip," said Patrick, drawing Isabella from her thoughts. "As soon as Michael is born and released, we'll go to the mountain. Mother Sarah insists that the presentation ritual must be done before the first full moon after birth." Isabella nodded, feeling a mild contraction. Instinctively, she touched the necklace at her neck, which pulsed with a comforting warmth. "I think we won't have to wait long," she said with a serene smile. "Michael is eager to meet his two worlds." Night fell over Atlanta, millions of artificial lights gradually replacing the natural light of the sun. In the Miller-Nelson couple's apartment, other lights were lit, less visible but equally real. A subtle glow emanated from Isabella's necklace, echoed by the stone on Patrick's cord. Thousands of miles away in the Blue Ridge Mountains, Russet observed the night sky from a rocky elevation, as if he could see beyond physical distance. Beside him, Mother Sarah and River prepared the house for the arrival of the new guardian. A sudden breeze stirred the leaves of the trees, carrying promises of regeneration. Where once there were scars on the earth, new saplings grew, nourished. By the renewed commitment, the balance slowly began to be restored. It was the beginning of a new cycle, a pact that didn't end but transformed, adapting to modern times without losing its ancestral essence. And at the center of this transformation, a baby about to be born, carrying in his blood both the weight of the past and the hope of the future. "It's time," whispered Isabella, feeling the first strong contraction. "Michael is coming." Patrick enveloped her in a protective embrace, his expression a mixture of paternal anxiety and spiritual reverence. The doctor and the believer, the skeptic and the convert, finally in harmony. "Then let's welcome him," he said, helping his wife to stand, and introduce him to his two worlds. As they left the apartment for the hospital, Isabella's necklace shone intensely, like a beacon guiding the way. In the Blue Ridge Mountains, Russet neighed to the crescent moon, announcing to the other guardians that a new time was about to begin. A time of reconciliation, of remade connections, of restored balance. A time when ancient mistakes could finally be forgiven. The seeds planted by Isabella would grow, becoming majestic trees in the same places where their ancestors had been cut down. Michael would grow between the city and the mountain, learning the ways of both worlds. And with each visit to Mother Sarah's house, each walk with River along the ancient trails, each encounter with Russet under the moonlight, the pact would strengthen, extending to future generations. The debt was being paid, not with suffering, but with commitment, not with separation, but with union. When Michael was born hours later, his first cry echoed not only in the aseptic walls of the hospital, but also on the ancient slopes of the mountain. His eyes, upon opening for the first time, saw beyond the veil without needing rituals or guides, and in his small heart, two worlds beat as one.